The conflict of the unexpected seating swap. The scent of polished wood and wilting lilies hung heavy in the high-ceilinged cathedral annex where the wedding rehearsal was being held. This was it, the final run-through before my younger brother, Thomas, married his fiancée, Clara. I, being his only sister and the designated reader of the main scripture, had a critical and deeply personal role. I surveyed the room. The reserved seats, marked with elegant ivory cards, were lined up neatly in the front row, signifying the immediate family's place of honor. There was the card for Thomas's parents, Clara's parents, the best man, and then, right next to my mother, a calligraphy card that read, "The reader, my name." My stomach gave a small, anticipatory flip. This seat wasn't just physical. It symbolized my importance to Thomas, a connection that had endured since childhood. But as I approached the designated spot, a figure was already settled there, bolt upright, hands clasped neatly in her lap. It was my younger sister, Sarah. Sarah, my military sister. She was currently on a rare 2-week leave from her deployment overseas. When Sarah was home, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Everything became precise, orderly, and, frankly, a little rigid. After years of commanding troops and adhering to strict military protocol, she carried an air of unquestionable authority, even in civilian clothes. Today, she was in a smart, if slightly too formal, navy blue dress, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. I stopped short, the polite smile I'd practiced for Clara's extended family fading. "Sarah," I began, my voice a soft query that barely breached the respectful silence of the room. "You're in my spot." Sarah turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting mine. A quick, cool assessment, the kind she usually reserved for subordinates. "I'm sitting here. My name," she stated, her tone flat and final, brooking no argument. "Yes, I can see that. But this one is marked, the reader. That's me, for the ceremony." I gestured toward the ivory card she had carefully placed on the floor beside her neatly polished shoes. "Doesn't matter," she replied, settling deeper into the plush cushion. "I'm here now. I just flew in, and frankly, I need the best view and the easiest access. I'm the immediate family who travels the farthest, therefore I take precedence. I'm family first. Besides," she added, a dismissive wave of her hand indicating the other seats, "you can sit with Aunt Carol or the children. It's all the front row." Her logic, while brutally efficient in a military sense, was completely devoid of familial warmth or respect for the wedding's established roles. She hadn't just accidentally taken the seat. She had presumed that her temporary return from service automatically elevated her status above mine, overriding the function I had specifically been asked to fulfill. The seat wasn't about comfort. It was about the role. A hot surge of indignation rushed through me. This wasn't the first time Sarah had used her military status to exert control or assume importance during family gatherings, but to do it at Thomas's wedding rehearsal felt particularly cruel. She had actively marginalized me, relegating me to a secondary position. It was a calculated, subtle power play. I opened my mouth to argue, to point out the specific, written-out role the card represented. But then my mother, sensing the escalating tension, caught my eye from across the aisle and shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Don't make a scene," her look communicated clearly. "Not today. Not here." Swallowing the bitter pill of resentment, I clutched my program tighter. I looked at the now vacant seat Sarah had implicitly pointed to, a folding chair tucked slightly behind a pillar, next to a collection of flower arrangements. It was the furthest seat from the front and essentially put me out of the main flow of the ceremony. With a stiff nod that I hoped conveyed my displeasure without inciting a pre-wedding war, I backed away. "Fine," I murmured, moving toward the isolated spot. "Enjoy the view, Sarah." I settled into the obscure corner chair, feeling small and suddenly unimportant. The insult cut deep. I wasn't just sitting in a worse spot. I was sitting in the back because my sister had used her rank, or the perceived privilege of it, to push me out of my rightful, designated place in my brother's ceremony. The feeling of being disrespected and utterly marginalized by my own sibling soured the festive anticipation that had been building all week. I watched Thomas and Clara laugh with the officiant, and a heavy, lonely feeling settled over me. I was physically present, yet felt entirely dismissed from the core of the event. All thanks to Sarah's unexpected and arrogant substitution. Hashtag the confused rehearsal and Sarah's rigid persona. The atmosphere, already strained by the silent confrontation over the seating, thickened as the wedding rehearsal officially began. From my relegated corner seat, the one I privately nicknamed the penalty box, I had a perfect, if distant, view of the unfolding awkwardness, much of it centered on my sister, Sarah. The officiant, Father Michael, a gentle man with a calming presence, began by welcoming everyone and explaining the flow of the processional. He was clearly working from a detailed script provided by the wedding planner, which specified who stood where and, crucially, who played which active role. Almost immediately, the confusion began. All right, let's start with the immediate family entering. Thomas's sister, the reader, you will enter directly after the parents and stand to the left of the altar, Father Michael instructed, looking directly at the front row where the cards dictated the placement. His eyes landed on Sarah, seated squarely in the reader's spot. Sarah, however, remained absolutely immobile. Her military training was evident in her stillness. She didn't twitch, didn't smile, and certainly didn't stand up. She seemed to assume that sister was a sufficient identifier, and that she simply needed to observe the instructions given to the role she was now embodying, which was none in this initial walkthrough. The silence stretched. Father Michael hesitated, glancing down at his script, then back at Sarah, a faint crease of confusion forming between his eyebrows. "Excuse me," he tried again, a little louder this time. "Thomas's sister, the reader? Could you please step out into the hallway to practice your entrance?" Sarah finally shifted. She tilted her head slightly, then looked past the officiant, scanning the room as if searching for an actual intruder or a military superior who had issued a countercommand. She then looked dismissively at the wedding coordinator, who was now subtly whispering a reminder to Father Michael. "I am Thomas's sister," Sarah announced, her voice precise and lacking any warmth. It wasn't an invitation to interact. It was a simple declaration of fact. "Yes, of course, dear," the officiant replied gently, clearly trying to avoid a public scene. "But are you the one who is scheduled to read the specific passage during the ceremony?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Sarah's perfectly composed face. She looked bored by the question, as if this civilian concept of a scheduled role was beneath her attention. "I was designated to take this seat," she said, completely bypassing the actual question about the reading. "I'm here to represent the family." The wedding coordinator stepped forward, clipboard in hand, clearly frustrated by the derailment. "Father, the schedule explicitly lists my name as the reader. She has the specific role. Is she here?" The coordinator's eyes swept past Sarah and then landed, with surprise, on me in my obscure folding chair. I gave a weak, resigned wave from the back. The officiant decided to push on, unwilling to directly address the obvious seating mix-up just yet. "Well, perhaps we can hold off on the official entrance for a moment. Let's review the standing positions at the altar itself. Thomas, you'll be here. Clara, here. Maid of honor, best man. And the reader will stand right here, stage left, ready for the first scripture." He pointed to a marker on the floor. He looked back at the front row, clearly expecting Sarah to stand and move into the position. She didn't. Instead, she crossed her arms, a clear signal that she was observing the drill, not participating in it. Her posture screamed, active duty observer, rather than active participant in a joyous family occasion. The lack of emotional involvement was palpable. While the other members of the wedding party, the enthusiastic maid of honor, the slightly nervous best man, were practicing their smiles and their steps, Sarah remained a stone monument. She was supposed to be the stand-in for the role of the person who would deliver a vital, emotional part of the ceremony, yet she projected nothing but rigid disinterest. It was becoming glaringly obvious to everyone watching, from Thomas and Clara, who exchanged nervous, confused glances, to the bridesmaids who were whispering behind their hands, that the person in the seat of honor was not the right fit for the role. Sarah's rigid, military persona was clashing fiercely with the intimate, warm ceremony they were trying to rehearse. She was acting like she was guarding the seat, not preparing to fill a function. Meanwhile, I sat in the shadows, my script clutched tightly, feeling the weight of the moment. I knew the reading by heart. I was ready to step up and make the rehearsal flow smoothly. But Sarah's stubborn presence, coupled with the family pressure not to create a scene, kept me glued to my penalty box. The rehearsal was stalling, confusion reigning, all because a card had been ignored and a presumed hierarchy had been enforced. The simple act of practicing the ceremony had become a tense, silent debate over who truly belonged in the spotlight. Hashtag the crucial intervention of the priest, the turning point. The atmosphere in the cathedral annex was now thick with low-level anxiety. The rehearsal was sputtering. They had managed to practice the recessional, with Sarah still observing from her commandeered seat, refusing to move unless explicitly ordered, which thankfully, the officiant was hesitant to do. The frustration was mounting. Not just mine, but visibly so for Thomas, Clara, and the entire production team. The ceremony was losing its intended rhythm because a key player, the reader, was physically present but functionally absent in the proper location. Father Michael, sensing the need to move past the processional confusion, clapped his hands gently. All right, let's transition into the heart of the ceremony. We need to practice the exchange of vows and, most importantly for the timing, the first reading. This is critical for the flow before the rings. He picked up a large, leather-bound Bible, adjusting his stole. He walked to the lectern, positioned directly in the center of the altar area, and paused, his gaze sweeping over the front row once more. This time, however, his eyes didn't linger on the confusion of the seating arrangements or the stoic figure of Sarah. Instead, they seemed to pierce through the crowd. Now, the scripture reading is not just about words. It's about inflection, timing, and most importantly, emotion. Father Michael began, his voice taking on a resonant quality that commanded attention. I was specifically told that Thomas and Clara wanted this particular passage, from Corinthians, chapter 13, read by the person who knows their history best, someone who has seen their journey. He looked directly past Sarah, past the parents, past the nervous maid of honor, and right into my eyes in my obscure corner chair. We need the reader to come forward now, he stated firmly. The person who is responsible for delivering the words of love, the words that ground this commitment. He lowered his voice slightly, adopting a personal, direct tone that cut through the formal air. Where is my full name? I need you up here, please. We must practice your delivery and positioning with the microphone now. The effect of his direct call was instantaneous and electrifying. The collective focus of the entire room, the wedding party, the extended family, the sound technician, the coordinator, snapped away from Sarah and landed squarely on me. My corner, which had been a haven of ignored solitude, suddenly became the epicenter of attention. Sarah, for the first time since I walked in, actually flinched. The mask of military rigidity cracked slightly. She knew, and everyone else now knew, that the designated seat was secondary to the designated function. Her assumption of seniority, based on travel or rank, had just been publicly nullified by the officiant's precise knowledge of the program. I felt a rush of complex emotions: surprise, relief, and a sharp, sweet sense of public vindication. The isolation I had felt dissolved instantly. I wasn't just Thomas's sister who happened to be around. I was my full name, the chosen reader, a vital component of the ceremony. I pushed myself up from the flimsy folding chair, gripping my script, which suddenly felt heavy and important. As I walked forward, I had to pass directly by Sarah. She refused to meet my eye, staring intensely at the floor just past her polished shoes. Her cheeks were flushed, a telltale sign of her embarrassment, a rare breach of her usual impenetrable composure. Thomas, my brother, offered a small, apologetic smile as I passed him. Clara squeezed my arm quickly, a silent acknowledgement of the awkwardness and a thank you for finally coming forward. When I reached the altar, Father Michael offered a warm, genuine smile. There you are. Good. We can't do this properly without you. He guided me to the lectern, showing me the height adjustment and the exact spot where I needed to stand to catch the light and the microphone. The public, unequivocal summons by the priest had been the necessary intervention. It bypassed the awkward family dynamic and the silent war over precedence. The authority of the ceremony itself, the specific need for a specific person to perform a specific task, had exposed Sarah's error. She had taken the seat, but she had not taken the role. And without the person who held the role, the rehearsal could not proceed. I was back where I belonged, thanks to the call that no one, not even my rigid military sister, could ignore. ### the reaffirmation of the role and the due rehearsal. The moment I stepped up to the lectern, the previous tension seemed to drain out of the room, replaced by a focused, productive energy. The relief on Thomas and Clara's faces was unmistakable. The rehearsal could finally move forward as planned, honoring the structure they had painstakingly created. Father Michael handed me a spare microphone and the script, nodding encouragingly. "All right, my name. Let's try this now. I want you to walk from your standing position, which is here, stage left, to the lectern, take a moment, deliver the opening line, and then we'll time your pace. Imagine everyone is here, focused on these words." As I took my designated spot, looking out over the mostly empty pews, I felt an immense sense of rightness. This was where I belonged. The vindication was quiet but profound. My importance wasn't derived from fighting for a chair. It was inherent in the task assigned to me, the trust Thomas and Clara had placed in me to deliver this sacred part of their day. I took a deep breath, the familiar words of the Corinthians passage already rolling in my mind. When I deliver the line, "Love is patient, love is kind," I want to make sure I pause just slightly so the words land. I explained to the father, showing him I had thought about the performance, not just the attendance. The rehearsal proceeded flawlessly for the reading. My voice, though slightly nervous at first, quickly found its strength. I practiced the pace, the eye contact, and the transition back to my standing position. The coordinator nodded approvingly at the timing. My role was functional, emotional, and necessary. Meanwhile, back in the front row, Sarah was forced to contend with the consequences of her seating blunder. She was now simply a member of the audience, watching the person she had attempted to displace execute the very task she had disregarded. I glanced over briefly. Where she had been ramrod straight and defiant before, she was now noticeably smaller in the oversized pew. She had shifted her gaze, perhaps out of shame or sheer stubbornness, focusing intently on the decorative tile pattern on the floor rather than the ongoing rehearsal. The public exposure, the undeniable fact that the ceremony needed me and not the chair she was occupying, had stripped her of her assumed superiority. Our mother, seated a few spots away from Sarah, leaned in and whispered something to her, likely a gentle but firm correction. Sarah offered a curt nod in response, but remained silent. The message was clear. In this family gathering, the rules of rank and precedence from the military did not apply. The hierarchy here was defined by love, relationship, and designated roles. When I finished practicing the reading, Father Michael complimented my delivery. "Excellent. My name." That was perfect timing and clarity. "We are all set for this section." I walked back to the side of the altar, feeling light and affirmed. Thomas gave me a warm, genuine smile that said more than any apology could. He had seen the seating conflict, and now he had seen the definitive resolution. The wedding party then moved on to the practice of the candle lighting ceremony. As the group shuffled and reformed near the altar, Sarah finally realized her isolation was complete. She wasn't needed to stand, she wasn't needed to walk, and she certainly wasn't needed to read. Her attempt to secure the best physical seat had resulted in her being completely shut out of the rehearsal's active components. In a small, defeated move, she reached down, picked up the reader, "My name" card she had tossed to the floor, and placed it neatly back on the cushion of the seat she had taken. It was her silent acknowledgement of the mistake, an offering of correction without the required humility of an audible apology. The rehearsal concluded with the final blessing, and as the lights came up, the order had been successfully restored. I was the reader, affirmed by the officiant and the entire wedding party. Sarah was simply a sister, momentarily humbled and undeniably out of place. The rehearsal wasn't just a practice of steps and words. It had served as an essential, public restoration of familial roles and respect. Hashtag the lesson and the post-rehearsal reconciliation. The rehearsal concluded with a rush of relieved chatter. Thomas and Clara were distributing small gifts to the wedding party, and the tension that had gripped the room earlier began to dissipate, replaced by the excited energy of the impending wedding day. I collected my script, feeling a pleasant mixture of satisfaction and lingering discomfort. I knew the seating incident couldn't just be glossed over. It had bruised our sisterly dynamic. I saw Sarah standing alone near the entrance, looking out of place among the bustling, celebratory family groups. She wasn't participating in the group photos or the casual banter. She looked withdrawn, her posture still rigid, but the defiance in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet, deep-seated chagrin. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the sister in the wrong seat. I walked over to her. "The reading went well, don't you think?" I started, keeping my tone neutral, avoiding any trace of triumph or sarcasm. Sarah turned slowly. She didn't offer a direct compliment, but simply stated, "Your pace was good. You didn't rush the lines." Coming from Sarah, that was practically effusive praise. The silence that followed was heavy. I waited. She knew she owed an explanation, if not a full apology. Finally, she exhaled, the sharp, defensive edges of her persona softening just slightly. She kept her eyes focused on a spot over my shoulder. "Look, I'm sorry about the seat," she mumbled, the words sounding foreign and uncomfortable on her tongue. Military life was about orders and efficiency, not apologies and nuanced feelings. "Why did you do it, Sarah?" I asked gently. "You saw the card. You knew I was the reader. It was an important role for me." She shifted her weight, finally meeting my eyes, and the vulnerability there was surprising. "It was stupid. I got home, and after months of deployment, everything feels backwards. In the service, the highest rank takes the front position. The person who traveled the farthest, who has the most time constraints, who is potentially called away, they get priority. It's a habit." I saw the seat, and my brain just registered priority position, not reader's designated spot. She paused, running a hand over the smooth fabric of her dress. "I honestly didn't think about the function. I only thought about the privilege. I thought because I'd been away, I deserved the best seat as a returning family member. I completely missed the point that the chair was reserved for a job that needed to be done." Her explanation was a genuine insight into the mental disconnect she experienced transitioning from the highly structured military world back to the messy, emotional landscape of family. She had substituted rank for affection and distance for dignity. When Father Michael called my name, my full name, and everyone turned to look at my empty seat, it was like a punch, she confessed. It made me realize that my priority seating meant nothing, because the ceremony literally stopped until the person with the right role stood up. The chair didn't make me important. My non-role made me irrelevant. This was the core of the lesson, not just for her, but for the family. Importance at this event wasn't measured by military rank, years of service, or geographical distance traveled. It was measured by the love and connection shared, formalized by the specific, irreplaceable roles that Thomas and Clara had chosen for their loved ones. I reached out and placed a hand on her arm, a gesture that bridged the gap between us. "I understand the habit, Sarah, truly. But here, you don't need a rank or a priority seat to be important. You're my sister. You're Thomas's sister. That's the only priority that matters in this building." She relaxed visibly, the tension melting from her shoulders. "I'll try to keep the military out of the wedding day, promise. I'll sit with Mom, where I was supposed to be. And I'll make sure to read the love is patient part loud and clear for you," I teased lightly. She managed a small, genuine smile. "Just make sure you pause at, love is not arrogant. I think I need to hear that part." We shared a brief, meaningful moment of sibling connection, a silent promise to move past the petty power play. The incident had been humiliating for her, But it had also served as a necessary reminder that in the family unit, love, function, and respect for individual roles trump rigid hierarchy every time. The wedding rehearsal, nearly derailed by a simple chair swap, had ultimately succeeded in rehearsing not just the ceremony, but the most important dynamic of all: family forgiveness and understanding.